How y'all? Using her words. I am so sorry for all of the technical difficulties. Being a few minutes late, we were here. We were just trying to get on. Hey, Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Facebook, YouTube lives. How about you, everybody? Listen, text, tag, send this program out to everybody. We're closing out our African American History celebration, and we want everybody to know about it. We want to see the show. We want them to see the show live so that they can interact with us. I'm going to start a little differently tonight. I can't even tell you about the guests right now. I'm still in awe. Tonight was the last show. It popped up over the weekend, and the right wingers and in that group celebrated to the hilt the fact that that possibly one of the first journalistic casualties that you will see coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in that ilk was the cancellation of the Joy Reid show. Joy just did her last show live on MSNBC. She had a bunch of her guests, the fellow and sister hosts came on to help her in the last segment of it. And I just want to say this about, first of all, a commentary about Joy Reid, one of the brightest minds you'll ever encounter. I know Joy was a journalist down here in South Florida for several years. And when the talk radio show kicked off, she was one of the first ones with the talk radio program and format here. She was here. She was instantly snatched up by MSNBC, starting with the weekend show. And one of the greatest moves that they made was putting her on the weekdays. I was just talking to somebody and I was telling them who was on, and they said, Joy? I said, yeah. They said, oh, the one they say be race baiting. I said, well, that's probably how they call it, because every time you tell the truth about the way things are, and it's a racial component that's not favorable to people who look like you and I, they call it race baiting. Whenever you call their racism out, they call it race baiting. So that's what you want to call it. Okay, that's what it is. But one of the brightest minds to ever be a journalist, Roland S. Martin left network TV and started his own. And you have to just be able to dig deep and say that God's got better. Just say it better. And so that's what we're going to say for Joy, that God's got better for Joy, because it's a crying shame a great mind like that has lost that mass forum that she has at 8 p.m., 7 p.m. on weeknights on cable TV. MSNBC is taking some strange turns. We'll talk about that later. But shout out to you, Miss Reid. We're going to talk about you a little later in the show. You are one of the great ones, and we're looking forward, just like we saw Roland S. Martin, we're looking forward to seeing more and greater and better from you. Thank you for not compromising anything and for calling it right down the middle. We love and appreciate you always. Listen, text, tag, and share this program. This is the fourth segment of our African American history celebrations. This year we didn't do sports figures. We didn't do. We didn't choose to do actors or comedians or entertainers. Period. What we chose to do this week was to celebrate excellence in several fields. We celebrated the first week excellence in the military and law enforcement. The second week we celebrated excellency in the fields of politics and law. And then last week we celebrated excellency in advocacy, where we looked at the advocacy of the 60s, that model, the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, and Dr. King's nonviolent peace movement, peaceful protests. And we discovered with Pastor Rhonda whether or not that would be relevant for us today, as it seems like we're heading back to those kinds of days. Tonight, I am so excited. Let me tell you what we're doing. We're doing excellency in journalism and in authorship. There's somebody watching this show tonight that has the gift of writing, and we're praying that this show, because my guest is so inspirational, that he will push you over the edge to where you will start that project that you've had in your head and your mind and your heart. You've thought about it. You'll actually start it after hearing him. I don't want to hope. I have been trying to determine and hold myself together all day long, ever since he consented to come on. Man, how can you be cool? How can you hold back? I've had two figures in my life that I've looked at as big brothers. I'm the older of three boys, and I had two figures that I looked at as big brothers. One was my cousin Dozell, who left us to go to Better Place last June, and this next guy is Mr. Marc Curtis Little. We call him Marc L. Marc Little, my dear friend. He's like a big brother to me, and we're going to talk about how we met. Marc, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Dozell. Good to be with you this evening.
Man, we are blessed beyond measure. I put a call in to Marc, and I know he's real busy. And when he called me back, it was just like I had just been told I was going into some kind of Hall of Fame or something. First of all, that he would think of me, and he always has. But after all these years, that he would think of me. Marc, what's going on with you right now, man? What's going on with you these days?
Well, it's good. Life is good. My wife and I are enjoying this weather. Some people think I'm a little crazy when I say that, being in South Jersey. However, we are enjoying the weather, not just the weather as it comes from heaven, but the weather being in the kind of church we want to be in, the kind of community we want to be in, closer to our friends and family. So it's going well.
Instead of me trying to introduce you, can you give us a snapshot of what your life has been, your professional life? We know you're a great athlete and all of those things.
Oh, really?
Just share with us.
Don't tell the guys I played with that. But I've been blessed to have had a life that has spanned so many different industries. I've been radio, television. I've been a book reviewer. I've been an MC. I can just go forever talking about those things. And the blessing, though, has been that I've met so many great people along the way. And some of those people, as you know, as a pastor, they're there for a season. And some are there for many, many, many seasons. And I've been blessed with that. Some seasons and some just for a season. And that has been good for me because I can reach back and now that I have a son who's nearly in his mid-40s and another son who I've kind of adopted who's a little bit older than him. And these two guys are doing some wonderful things with their lives. And every once in a while, they'll call me and say, "Dad, thank you." And I said, well, send me something just for that, to augment that thank you. I'm just kidding about that. But my life has been good. Radio, TV, and now to finish it off, as I say, I've got more years behind me than I have in front of me. God has blessed me for the last nearly 20 years to be a writer. And that's been, I guess that's going to be my swan song before I leave and go home.
Well, when Madam Producer and I were discussing the show last week, we were discussing. I went ahead and put out what we wanted to do for a show this week, and I said I want to do journalism, but I think there's more since it's the last show. What else could we include? And we kicked around. We talked about authorship, and she talked about tech people in everything. I said, oh my goodness. I mean, I've been waiting and wanted to try to get him anyway. But we could get Marc L. He serves both, and we don't have to share the airspace with anybody else because he can do both journalism and authorship. And we're going to be putting on his authorship a little bit. We're going to talk about it a little bit on the other side of the midway break. But we're certainly going to talk about. Marc, tell us about your career in journalism. Did you go to school in California?
Yes. Went to Los Angeles City College, class of 72.
Wow.
In fact, aside from that, I had the opportunity to almost work with Brian Gumbel when I was out there. I was one of the better students in my class, in broadcasting class and speech class at Los Angeles City College. And we went over to Channel 4 in LA where Brian Gumbel had started. And Brian had offered to all of us an opportunity to say, well, you can come and intern here. But I already had an internship at a radio station, KFI, which was a talk radio station. Had the chance to work with Dave Garroway, who had, if anybody knows about great broadcasters, I had the opportunity to work as his assistant. at KFI Radio in Los Angeles. So I missed the opportunity to work with Brian. Who knows what would have happened had I worked with Brian Gumbel at that time in my life. But my broadcasting career, I'd always wanted to do sportscasting. If you ask any of my friends, when we used to play in the gym at Pestine Avenue School in Newark, New Jersey, I used to do the play-by-play. But when we would play ball, the 5-on-5 full court, if we get knocked out, I'd be over there broadcasting, and they would get a kick out of it. And I said to myself, that's what I want to do. I used to go to the local radio station, watch the DJs work, WNJR Radio in Newark, and a couple of DJs said, well, you got to get some experience. And the old saying was, you got to start out at Chicken Switch, Mississippi, which I don't even know if there's such a city called Chicken Switch, Mississippi. But what they meant was you got to get down in the sticks so you can move up to the bricks. And that was the way my career started. I got the opportunity. I was a good student at LACC. I was on the dean's list each semester. And I wanted to come south to work in radio. The reason why I wanted to come south was because both of my parents from the South. My dad's from Anderson, South Carolina. My mother's from a place called Twin City, Georgia. But I never was able to go down south. If you know, during the time I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, that wasn't the place you wanted to send a loudmouth black kid. And of course, my mother always, as many mothers during that time, always had in their mind about Emmett Till. And my mother always told me, she said, I cannot let you go down south, that I may never see you again. So I was denied the opportunity to travel south at any point in my life. So I said, I wanted to go south. And lo and behold, I ended up in Jacksonville, Florida. Came August 14th, 1972. And my mother bought me a brand new suit and new shoes to fly in the airplane down to Jacksonville. Started out at WERD and made a name for myself at WERD. Then WPDQ came calling and they brought me over. And I did a radio show from midnight to 6 at PDQ. I did a radio show at ERD, my first job, from 10 to 3. So those were the things I did. But what I wanted to also do, because this was the community-minded person of me, I wanted to get out there and talk to the kids in the community. And that's when I ran to young people like you. And that's how I burnished my name in Jacksonville.
Well, Marc, now let's go back to WERD.
Sure.
I want to ask Banner producer, pull that graphic because we'll talk more about it in a second. You keep Marc up. So recently on Facebook, I have been seeing this surface, and I'm glad we got to have this conversation. Just as a quick sidebar. WERD, and by the way, you hear how well he enunciates each syllable of each word. He used to always get on me, say, you got to stop popping them peas and you got to stop chopping your words.
You remember that, huh?
Between he and my mother, who's an English teacher, I'm still working on that. I think that's something that tall people have to deal with. Almost everybody in my height has had that. But whenever I'm around you, I'm going to always try to get it right.
Okay.
But WERD, I see surfacing as I see people in the movement saying that was a radio station in Atlanta. Yes. That SCLC started. So it started there and was bought out in Jacksonville.
What happened was the owners of WERD actually came to Jacksonville and owned the station called WRHC. When the call letters became available, whoever bought the station in Atlanta let go of the call letters WERD, and so the owners of WRHC in Jacksonville said, well, those are our call letters, so they brought them down to Jacksonville. So you had two predominantly black radio stations in Jacksonville. You had WOBS, which was a daytime station. It came on in the mornings, and then it went off at daybreak at dusk. And it switched around through the times. If it was at the Eastern Daylight Time, it went off at like 7 o'clock or 7:30. If it was Eastern Standard Time, it went off at 5:30. But WRHC, which ended up being WERD, was a 24-hour station. So that was how WERD's call letters got to Jacksonville. The owners of the RHC had the call letters of WERD, and when they moved to Jacksonville, and the WERD call letters became available, they petitioned the FCC and got them to Jacksonville.
So we're gonna talk more about that career and how many nights after you transitioned over to PDQ, and I really got to know you. How I would go to school to Sandwood High School, sleep in the mornings because I'd stay up all night.
Yeah,
talk to you.
that's right.
We're gonna talk about those kinds of things later. But I want to celebrate some of the giants and pioneers. One of the very first persons we saw on network TV who had a network TV news profile was Max Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Max Robinson, and Max was at ABC, which was somewhat of a fledgling network. If locally, ABC was the channel that we looked at Batman on, and it was all fried up. You had to have your rabbit ears working well. But Max Robinson left us a little young in age, but he was one of the ones. Was Max out of Chicago, Mark?
He came from, yes, he was a Chicago broadcaster, exactly.
Yes, and he was smooth and silky and accurate, and you never saw him challenge a whole lot or the kind of stuff that you hear now, the term fake news and those kinds of things. He had command of what he did, and we just celebrate those people who were on in the trade before us, who opened doors. And we're going to talk a little bit about TV in a bit. But Max Robinson was one of the first ones, and of course, some of our viewers tonight may remember very easily Ed Bradley. Let's hear Ed Bradley talk about his experience over in Saigon, doing some actually doing on the field work.
Well, actually, he was the last broadcaster to leave Saigon. He almost missed that plane.
Oh, really? Tell us about that.
That last plane that flew out of Saigon in 1975, Ed Bradley, because he was so committed to his craft, wanted to get that last story in before he got out of there. And he got on that plane. He might have been the last person to get on that plane, but he was on the last plane to get out of Saigon.
Well, let's see that clip. And he was talking about that. I think we kind of short. Let's see the clip, and we'll revisit that.
Okay.
There were two things actually. One, I saw the Ho Chi Minh Trail. I mean, I saw these guys, men and women, carrying supplies, and I just, I heard all of these stories about the bombing and the interdiction of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Well, here's a guy coming down and he's carrying belts, someone else carrying.
So it left us about 10 years ago, and maybe a little longer. I would just invite anybody. So our subject all month long has been excellence. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about individuals like the two we mentioned thus far, you're talking about excellence, and you're talking about who could have been on any network, and there were no barriers that could hold them back. Their talent kind of made a way for them. Wouldn't you say so, Mark?
Well, what they did, and sometimes when I say this, people get it wrong, but their activism was not the number one thing. What their objectivity was what they really majored in, because when you're objective, that means you see the whole picture.
Yes.
When you narrow it down to activism, there's nothing wrong with activism. Don't get me wrong. Activism is good in its place. But objectivity and knowing your craft is what's paramount. Ed Bradley had that. Max Robinson had that. Brian Gumbel had that. And those are just three that I can mention, but there are a whole lot of them in local markets like Jacksonville, Florida, like Miami, like New York and Philadelphia. There were people like that who said, I'm going to be just as good as the guy next to me who doesn't look like me. I'm an activist, but I'm just as good as he is. And I don't have to leave my activism and let that lead me. Let my objectivity and my professionalism lead me. That's what made them stand apart from everybody.
I want to thank you for bringing that out. And I'm going to address that in 1 second. I want to address our viewers who are so faithful. Bernard, Curtis, hello to you, my brother. Mark, who is always with us. Mac is a Marine at heart. He's a Marine. He is a Marine. He and my brother served together. And our dear sister, Miss Coretta, we just so glad you guys are here. And thank you all. Make sure and share this out and let others know about what we're talking about. I think. So I was looking at the recently fired Joint Chief of Staff. Do y'all see how I'm trying to enunciate each word correctly because I'm in the presence of my mentor and my mother's watching? But he was saying just that. This was in 2020 before he assumed that role, and he was saying how he understands any and everything he does it's been closely watched.
Absolutely.
And that his standard was always above the other standard. It had to always be above the normal standard because that's what we had to do. And you make a very vital point that they did not back away from activism, but objectivity in broadcasting and in journalism is the main thing. We hear the term fake news now.
Right.
I mean, we have this wide array of we got MSNBC who's way over to the left. I don't know, it's not coming across the screen. Way over to the left, and now you got CNN. It's a little bit on the inside, a little bit closer to the center, and then you have Fox that's way out yonder to the right, and then Newsmax and some of those try to be cousins of the Fox News, and they're out there. And it's so everything is perspective driven. Everything is perspective driven. Right. You have to really read and understand and look at everything to get the real core of the news. The objectivity, like you say, is just not there. Will we ever get back there, you think, Mark?
Social media has changed everything. Okay. We have to put that on Front Street. Social media has shifted the whole landscape. What has happened is instead of people wanting to be objective and allow their professionalism to lead the way, so many people have opted for clickbait. They say the most outrageous thing and it gets shared, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And I applaud those broadcasters, and they're a precious few who don't fall for that.
Yes.
Let's think about it. With Ed Bradley and Max Robinson, Brian Gumbel, and I'm just using them because they come at the top of mine. I don't have any notes here. Yeah. Can you imagine them in this era where what you wanted to do was you wanted to make sure that you had a million followers, and you wanted to give some clickbait so they can get you 10 million followers? There wouldn't be any news, and that's where we are today. And one of the things I think that we need to understand is that we in our culture, and perhaps the other cultures, will understand that we need to stand on principle. And sometimes principle is not what the masses of us want, the right thing to do. Because in the final analysis, when you work on principle, you get a better believability for the masses. I know that's hard to decipher. But if you read anything that Dr. King wrote, you would get what I'm saying about living on principle.
Wow.
That's where we need to be in this wide arena of mass communications.
Wow. Well, we got a lot we want to cover, but let me cover myself for Coretta and all of my other sisters on here. Let me do this before we go to break. Joe, you know what? Let's do Christian Welker right now. Christian is the recent the leader of Meet the Press now, the moderator of Meet the Press. She ironically, as glad as I was to see a sister get this role, I hated to see my friend leave, whom she replaced, and I think it just kind of I think that the news industry just kind of follows trends. You need a black female woman. You need an Asian male. You need a Middle Eastern female. I think it kind of flows in that, and so she became the moderator of Meet the Press. But don't get it twisted. She handles it and handles it well. I have seen her deal with some very, very tough interviews. And I think we'll come back to Joy after the break. But Christian Welker, we just I'm trying to think of the brother, Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd. My aunt would skin me alive because she loved herself some Chuck Todd. We both did. But Christian Welker is on, and she's not just a beautiful face. She's a fantastic mind and an awesome journalist. And I just like people like Marc set the standard for excellence. And that's where we want to be. Marc, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and do a little bit more journalism, and then we're going to hop over to authorship, your latest passion that you're a successful brother. Let's go to break, and we'll be right back. GoGetGoWorld.com. Man, listen, this guy, it's not easy making this face attractive or even palatable or acceptable for TV or camera, but they got you. I mean, they got you. They got me. The two Toyas and the Makias and that team, that Go Giga team has all of your virtual needs. They got them, and we're going back to more virtual things. They got you. Listen, they got you. We're building those things. GoGetGoWorld.com. Contact them right now, okay? All right. Listen, before we go to break, before we get back to the show, I want to do this. I want to mention some heroes, and they happen to be sports figures. And I want to start out with Curt Flood. Curt Flood was Curt Flood. Can we get his picture up? Curt Flood was a baseball player, excellent in his own right as an athlete. And Curt Flood was traded from one team to the other. He protested the trade, and he took it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and he lost. He lost it in the midst of his career. He lost, but he set the stage for what now is known to the ears of every athlete in pro sports now, the term, have you all heard the term free agency? He helped set the guidelines for free agency. The former St. Louis Cardinal, Mr. Curt Flood, and it was he was basically blackballed from Major League Baseball because of his stance, but he made it possible that people like Giancarlo Stanton down here with the Marlins could go sign for millions because he wasn't going to make it here with the New York Yankees, or people like Bobby Bonds to leave the small market that was Pittsburgh and go out to San Francisco, where he had what should have been a Hall of Fame career. And Curt Flood fought for that and gained free agency. And his career ended because of his stance. But some of these guys and ladies prove that sometimes they'll sacrifice themselves for the masses. Curt Flood died as a non-citizen of this nation. He lived down, I think it was Puerto Rico. And we just want to honor him tonight. The Dollar, I want to make sure that you know who Curt Flood was. He was more than just a second baseman, shortstop, third baseman. Curt Flood stood up and initiated what is now free agency, where you can move from team to team. You're not owned by anybody. They can't trade you away like a slave owner could. And you have a word in what you do. All of these no trade contracts, people like him got him started. The next person I want to mention is Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson, the Big O, when we start talking about the all-time greats in basketball, he is one of them. Before there was Magic, there was Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson was one of the greats, played with the Cincinnati Royals, and he ended up winning a championship with Lou Alcindor at the time. He's now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the Milwaukee Bucks. They teamed up together. But Oscar's claim to fame was free agency. He pushed for it in the National Basketball Association, and he pushed for it, and he became the head of the unions. And though he is one of possibly easily one of the top 10 basketball players of all times, the people who are now playing in the association will always be appreciative because of the fight that Oscar Robertson made to get free agency and to lead a union that was strong in the National Basketball Association. And I'm hoping that many of you all know this next person. He was a great quarterback. He took his team to the Super Bowl, came within one play of winning the Super Bowl, where the two Harbaugh brothers played the 49ers against the Baltimore Ravens. His name is Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick was that picture actually shows him bending knee. He's on his knees. He's standing with two other people. He's bending, and he was a starting quarterback at the time, well on his way to what could have been a Hall of Fame career. Colin Kaepernick bended to bring attention to police brutality and police killing Black people in America. There was Colin Kaepernick before we ever heard of a Black Lives Matter movement. And Colin was also blackballed from the National Football League, as was Kurt Flood. And they gave him a Mickey Mouse, I call it a Mickey Mouse tryout in Atlanta, and it was minimized, and nothing ever came of it. This was after he had set out 3 or 4 years and his skills had diminished anyway. But he put it all on the line so that to bring attention to our people being killed. He junked his career. He sacrificed his career so that we could make laws. We can put the George Floyd bill, keep it alive. Maybe someday it will pass because of people like Colin Kaepernick that bended on his knees in protesting during the national anthem. And as I said last week, the billionaires who look like you and I ought to come together and make sure that he earns for the duration of his days what should have been his average contract, his average salary as a quarterback in the National Football League. I want to shout these three brothers out for their outstanding work. We're back. Mark, I want to look at Joy Reid. And I think we got a little tape on her, and then we want to discuss her before we move on. Can we bring Joy up? I think Joy's.
The Republican convention did its very best to shove the right-wing roadmap to a second Trump term, Project 2025, into a dungeon. But even if it wasn't mentioned, the subtext of it was everywhere in the ideas presented on stage. Donald Trump even name-checked an official with ties to Project 2025.
So, yeah, somebody said that Joy race baited. What she did was call it as it was, and she called it out. And I just appreciate her, but I appreciate her genius as a journalist. What was some of your how do you feel about what happened with her, Mark? I know they said it was the ratings, but
well, you know, it's a hard thing to really define in today's world because you've got major corporations which own these stations, which own these networks, and the companies that advertise with them, and the bottom line for them is the bottom line. And I can't really lay it out how you can change, how that can be changed unless you change the whole system of economics in this country. So I really can't, that has happened to so many people. I can tell you it happened to me in Jacksonville in 1980 and 1981 when I was working Channel 4. I don't know if you remember when I was a sportscaster at Channel 4. I used to do I was a sports reporter during the weekend. I was a weekend sports anchor. First Black sports anchor in the state of Florida by about 6 months. I think I beat Cambrell Marshall, who was a very well-known sportscaster down in South Florida. I think he came about 6 months after me. And I had made I wrote a letter to the editor, the Florida Times Union, about the way that they were treating some of the Black people coming to the junior AAU tournament that was at Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. And I was told that I had to apologize for what I said in that letter to the editor, and I didn't apologize, and I was fired. That was in 1981. Okay, so I know about something and similar to what happened to Joy, although not on the same scale, but it's all relative.
Well, as I said in the opening statements, that when I was discussing with the young Black brother earlier, he said, "Oh, that's the one that said be race baiting." I said, "Well, that's what they say, because she calls it out as it is. Now, if you had instances where she's exaggerated, where she's lying, then it would be a legitimate claim. But when she's calling facts for what they are, she was talking about Project 2025 8 months ago. In fact, she was one of the ones who brought it to my attention, and I started researching, and we immediately started talking about it on this show, and we're seeing the effects of it now. Well, what would you see, Mark? And Mark, I had left Jacksonville. I had no idea that all of that had transpired. I heard that you were doing sports at WJXT, was it?
Right, Channel 4, right.
Okay, wow. I did not know that. I did not know that. Well, we're gonna get back to some more fun stuff, radio. Toy, could you put WPDQ back up there again? Mark, tell us about the coming together of WPDQ and what Black AM's radio was like back then. And by the way, Bernard remembers you, Mac remembers you from Jacksonville. They're some of our loyal viewers, and they well remember you and have mentioned you. What was it like when WPDQ came together? And I'm just going to give my commentary. I have never, and I've been in all 50 states, I have never seen an array of talent on one network, on one station like there was at PDQ. What brought you all together?
Well, we WPDQ for years was one of the hot top 40 stations. Top 40 meaning that they repeat the same songs over and over, 40 same records. That was what top 40 radio was back in the 60s and 70s. And along with WAPE, those were the standard bearers in Jacksonville and North Florida. Well, the station was bought in 1972. Well, actually, the callers were changed. Not callers, but the format was changed on January 1st, 1973. And WPDQ became the first 24-hour full music station. Not, because at WRHC or WERD, they play gospel most of the night. From Reverend Smith was on, I believe, from 9 o'clock at night until about midnight. And then they had jazz with Abram King until noon, midnight until 6. So WPDQ was just like any other station that played pop music, the top popular music, and they were 24 hours. And what happened? They just took the city by storm. And we had just a bunch of young guys. I was at the time 22. Wow. Otis Gamble was 22, was the program director. We had a little dad, John Hill, who was a little bit older than us. We had Herb Ellis, who was 22 or 23. We had a bunch of young, hungry disc jockeys. And every time there was something going on in Jacksonville or even Gainesville, because we broadcast our way to Gainesville, and we were there and hanging out and doing our thing. And so WPDQ became a legend. And when you say that we had some really talented people, we had some serious talent. Not only on the wheels of steel, which were where the records were being played, but we also had some great news people who were young. Betty Bullock, Jim Pinkney. Yes. Go on with names all day about who we had at WPDQ. But WPDQ was the station, and not in Florida. We were known all across the country.
So you guys had, and most people will know him from the Yolanda Adams show, Funky Larry Jones.
Yes, Larry and Sex Machine Ernie Singleton both came from New Orleans, because Otis, who was our program director, Otis Gamble, used to work at WOBS, and he got a call from WYLD in New Orleans to come and work there. He did a bang-up job over there. And when he got ready to come back home, because he's a Jacksonville native, he told Larry Jones, Funky Larry Jones, and Ernie Sex Machine Singleton, and Herb Ellis, I want you guys to come with me to Jacksonville. We're going to take over. And that's what happened.
Man, so you guys, I know that was this one promo where, Otis and Larry had this big guy, little guy thing going on, and young and old or whatever. But I know there was this one promo that say, Larry would say something, and then Otis would come on and say, this is the program director. I know that I didn't hear that, boy. And then Larry said, I think you did. Larry had that quick win. And it was just, oh, man. And then you had Eddie T on from 8 to midnight. And then you came on, and you and I talked all night long.
Right, I was on from midnight to 6.
Man.
Exactly.
Oh man, what a time you guys had, and of course, little daddy, little sugar daddy John Hill, who lives out here in South Florida. I was I meet with a group of seniors on Monday mornings, and they say, man, you should have met his dad. And then they went on to say he became a gynecologist. Little daddy was James Brown's godson, and oh man, just an array of talent. What about AM radio back then, Mark?
Well, AM radio, if the magic to AM radio's popularity, if you were on the lower end of the dial, we were fortunate to be at 600 AM. When you were at the lower end of the dial, for some reason, I guess because that's where people, when they turned their radios back in the day, when you had to turn it, not to punch it or whatever you do now. I don't even know what you do now with radio, but you that was where the success was, and mainly black stations. And when I say black station, I'm talking about rhythm and blues stations like OBS and ERD. They were at the other end, 1300, 1400, 1460. So those weren't the real popular stations, only amongst the audience that looked like us. But PDQ, because PDQ was at 600 AM, it was an anomaly at the time. When you had a station that catered to a specific audience, which was the African American audience at that time, and to be at 600, that was an anomaly at that time. Very few stations that catered to black audiences were at that level, at that place on the radio dial.
So WPEQ used to be, it was right down in the heart of downtown Jacksonville.
Beaver and Laura.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Laura, and you guys bought the building. And PDQ used to be the competition to the Big 8. Right. The Big 8 was heard all over Southeastern America. I remember my dad, we were driving to Carolina one time, and my dad heard the siren blaring, and he kept looking and slowing down and looking and thinking that the police was behind him, and it was the Big 8 because it was a hit back there. WAPE. So, but PDQ was this competition, and you guys just came in and just, oh man, I don't get me started. I want to pay tribute to Frankie Crocker. Yeah, that's Mark back in the day. That's Mark back in the day when he was Mark L. That was my buddy. We talked all night long. I would bring my concerns, my cares. I say, man, I got a paper tomorrow that's due, but I'm dealing with this. Mark would talk to me as a big brother. Oh, what a friend, what a fellowship we had.
Dozell, by the way, I was the number one. Well, I earned, I hate to say won, I earned the distinction of being the youngest winner of the Announcer of the Year in Billboard magazine that year, 1974. I was 21 years old, and I held that distinction for almost like 30 years. And then later on in my career, I won earned 7 Billboard magazine awards for either air personality or program director of the year. So I had a good career in radio, real good career.
Man, you guys, and I only learned talking to you lately just how much you guys had to hustle just to live back then. I thought,
we didn't get paid much.
Yeah, they're making the money now. What do they call it?
Syndication.
Syndication now.
Oh yeah,
and the big money. But you guys said, if you could just show Frankie Crocker. Frankie was he was Frankie Crocker, the mighty rock out of WBLS in New York City. And I spent a week up there with a friend doing a revival, and I would tape his program every night. I say, man, I see why everybody talks about this guy. He is so smooth. And Frankie left us. He's buried down here, actually. But what a time that was. I want to transition, Mark, over to authorship because you fit both of those bills. And I want to lead in with that with an author that we all respect nationally, poet laureate, author, just an advocate, Mrs. Maya Angelou. And then we want you to talk about a little bit about the trade in your books and so forth.
A rock, a river, a tree, hosts to species long since departed, marked the mastodon the dinosaur who left dry tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages.
Marc, you have always been an innovator. You've always been one of those guys that say, I'm going to try this. I remember you had a sports shop in Gateway, and man, we need to do something on Gateway one Black History Month. But you reminded me of my dad. He'd always would stretch out and do something and others were not doing, be an innovator. What got you into writing?
I had been, I would say, the darkest period of my life in the early 2000s, and I was trying to find relevance. I had pretty much eschewed the radio because radio had changed. I had done a talk radio show on a station. Oh gosh, I forgot to call that, but I had done very well. But they had gone the syndicated route, and they had to, I had to leave, and so I was wandering around for something, and I'll never forget that I got saved in 1995. But I always tell people, you can get saved, but you still, if you haven't submitted, then you're not fully there. And I was in that, and I gotten saved, but then I started understanding that I had to submit myself to God. I was sitting at my computer, January 15th, 2007, and I was praying. I pray every morning, and I prayed, and I said, God, I want to do something that will give you glory, and especially give you glory for what I'm doing. And I said, but I need that. I want to write a book, but I can't think of the name of the book. And I just sat there and I said, I want to give you glory. And so God, in his way, not saying anything, but dropping something into your spirit, he said, name the book, Don't Blink When God Calls.
Wow. And
that was my very first book. I published that in 2008, and I've gone on to publish 6 more books, all independently published. All of 3 of them major award winners in their own right. And that was what really propelled me to want to write. Now, when I wrote the first book, it's very raw because it was an independently published book. I only had $500 to get it published and everything else done with it. My mother, God bless her soul, said, I'm going to give you this $500, but you don't spend it on anything but that book. She made that very clear. And I went on to write Angels in the Midst after that, Magnificent Redemption, after Obama, Faithful Servants, and the book that has been my best book has been The Bootlegger's Mistress, which I did in 2020, right in the throes of the pandemic. And I just felt that I had done so much, Dozell, with my life, community activism, a professional in radio and TV and everything, but I had never, ever done anything writing. I wrote news releases and stuff, and I had my public relations and advertising business, but that wasn't like writing something that you put your heart into. And that's what this was all about. I credit my wife, Zandria, who stood behind me in this career. We have gone down the road making this career work. And now we're on the cusp of getting an agent so we can go traditional publishing to a major publishing house. And right now that's what we're working on. And if it's in God's will, it will be successful. If God says he wants me to go another route to get there, I'll do that. But that's been my stock and trade. I love writing. I would say I wish I knew I could do it earlier, but we know only God makes that call. And but he did make that call with Don't Blink When God Calls. And when I didn't blink, God kept moving it right along. And I'm very proud of that. Have made that move.
I got to get the preacher part in. So you're sitting there at the computer.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You haven't gone through, and literally you say, God, what do I name a book? And he drops that in your spirit.
Mm-hmm. And the I in that, and if you look at, there's an I in on the cover. My little girl she was 8 years old, I think, at the time. And I kept saying to her, I said, Savannah, what do I put in this book to really make it stand out? And she said, well, why don't you use an I?
Wow.
From the mouth of babes. From the mouth of a baby. She said, and she was the one that if you notice, in that I, there's a cross.
Wow.
And
yes.
That was her idea for that cover of that book.
So I mean, if I was Bishop Rudolph McKissick Jr. right now, I just say, won't he do it?
Well, hold on. Yes, he will.
What we do. So you went from doing spiritual books to the bootleggers mistress,
Right.
and that's fiction, a work of fiction.
All of them fiction. All 6 books are fiction. All 6 books are novels.
What is the impetus? What is the impetus, and what's the organizational structure for putting it from mind to canvas?
Well, what happens is, first of all, you have to have, I'm going to go for the independently publishing route first. You have to have an idea of what you want to convey. My feeling is that I just wanted to convey something that made sense coming from me, coming from my heart, my experiences. But at the same time, if you're going to sell the book, it's got to be something that somebody else may feel the same way. And that's where the marketing comes in. So I had to not only write what I felt in my spirit, but I also had to convey it to a body of people who believed in it. And that's when, I guess you can say, the salesman came out at me, that I would be able to sit down and go to book clubs and book fairs and other conferences and talk about the book and convey the spirit which moved me to write these books and put together the characterization and the plots and all that. And so and once again, it wasn't me. It was all God's work. And so I make that very clear. One thing about independent publishing that I think people need to understand is that when you're independent publishing, it's only meaning you're independently publishing, but you're still writing a book that's should be marketable. So you can't cut corners. You know, people say, well, I can write a book. I can just put some words on paper. It's a book. No. You've got to think about a professional editor. You've got to think about a professional interior designer, a professional book cover designer, and someone who can teach you the 9 yards about publishing a book, except you're doing it on your own. My wife and I felt that I had done enough of those 6 books, 3 of them which were major award winners, After Obama, Faithful Servants, and The Bootlegger's Mistress. And she said, it's time that you need to start thinking about making that leap to going into traditional publishing. And that's what the big companies, the Simon & Schusters and the Hatchettes and Doubleday and things like that. And you can only get to them, mainly go to them. Some people can go directly from writing and going to a publishing house, but normally you need an agent. And an agent has to be convinced that the book that you're writing is going to be a sale, be able to be sold to a publishing house, and then they can make their money back, that they advance you when they put the book out, whether it's on Amazon, in the bookstores, and so forth and so on.
So, Marc, how can people get a hold to your great works?
I had that's my information right there. My Instagram, my Facebook, Twitter, everything else. That information is there. The best way to get to me that I like is send anything to me via my Facebook page. Okay.
Marc, any closing comments? Man, it's unfair that you and I are limited to an hour, but thank God we can always talk. Thank you for just inspiring my audience, our audience. This is Kim. Kim and I do this together. We'll say he's on assignment.
Okay.
Just thank you for folk. When I tell you this brother was an inspiration to my life, I mean it wholeheartedly. In many ways, more so than he'll ever know. Great parents, awesome parents, awesome leaders. But sometimes you need people like a couple years older than you that you can see that are in the throes of life right in front of your parents. You have this aura, there's a hero thing that my brother talks about all the time. He has for my dad, and I think all 3 of us had that for my dad and mom. But Marc was vulnerable with me, and he shared with me, and just blessed me in ways beyond measure. And my prayer is tonight that he blessed you. You heard enough about his works and his life and his careers that it's been a blessing to you. Any closing comments with Dozie Land tonight, Marc?
I would like to say, and I don't ever want to leave out my parents, Matthew and Clara Little, 2 stalwarts in our community, in our small South Ward community in Newark, New Jersey. My mother was nurse's aide, but don't let that belie her spirit. She was a PTA president in our school for almost 40 years. Even after we left elementary school, she served as a PTA president. And in fact, she was the first Black woman to be named to the executive committee of the Essex County PTA back in the 1990s. She was committed not only to her children, but to the children in the neighborhood. When they needed a way station, our address, 897 100th Street in Newark, New Jersey, was their way station. When my dad worked at General Motors and he had to work a little overtime and we played baseball, she would go to the games with us, and she was our coach. My father, hardworking man, war hero in World War II, in the U.S. Navy. Those are the people that really set the stage for me, and I praise them all the time. Now, in my time, now that they're gone, my main people, my wife Zandria, her brother J. Wendell Mapson, Pete Jr., who's the pastor of Monumental Baptist Church in Philadelphia. Those are the people who are driving me now, because in their own way, they have taken the place of my parents. Now, of course, my wife is not my mother. Let's make that very clear. Yes. But they have that kind of spirit that I was used to in growing up in the 50s and the 60s in Newark, New Jersey. So the only thing I can say, and I want to say, by the way, I want to say hello to Curtis Jackson, my good friend over there at Afro-American Life Insurance Building. But it's just, I can't say it in 5 minutes, Dozie. I just say, just keep the faith. That's about the best I can do. Is you got to keep the faith.
Be encouraged, be inspired. Thank you, Marc. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on and blessing us tonight. My brother started a segment that's called How We See It, and I've got to do that tonight. How I see it. How I see it is that ours is an excellent history, from the Middle Passages through becoming free persons, to becoming the Civil Rights Movement, the Jim Crow laws, the Civil Rights laws from the Montgomery bus boycott of '65, to having Black mayors and Black senators and Black governors and Black representatives, and even a Black president and a Black vice president. But always the nurses, you heard Marc talk about, the factory workers, every gamut, the school teachers, the superintendents that poured into young people, everybody, the preachers, everybody who made our neighborhood special and connected us as families and kept us together. That's why we are what we are. That's how we've been able to survive. And that's why we'll thrive and survive, but we have to go through this again. From our first celebration, a celebration of excellence of law enforcement and the military, to celebration of law and of politicians, to the celebration of excellence in the field of advocacy, to the celebration of excellence in journalism and in authorship. We are special people. We've been brought a long ways. We do special work. We have a resilience that comes only from Almighty God, and it's our solemn responsibility to stand for the next generation. I know we do have our own mindsets about them, but yes, they had them about us. And so we're going to push and pour in and make the difference. That's how we see it. We are special people. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far along the way. May we forever stand true to our God and true to our native land. Thank you, Marc Little, for being a big brother to us all. Tonight's dialogue with Dozie was dedicated to Miss Roberta Flack, who left us today at age 88, and also to the Union man, Jerry Butler, who left us this past weekend. Thank you for what you did to brighten our lives here on earth. Dialogue with Dozie. We'll be right back next week, and we're going to be looking back at the pandemic, looking back at the George Floyd situation and all that we went through in the year 2020. God bless. Dialogue with Dozie. KV, we love you, bro.